Take 54.
I don't know what he's talking about. Welcome to another fresh and new No One Likes Us Talking podcast. My name's Joe Amphlett. I'm joined in the studio by the beautiful Graham.
Hello, Joe.
And the sensual Ted.
Oh, I'll say, Mrs.
Yes. Ooh-ah.
Ooh-ah.
Ooh-ah. It's good to see you, boys. Lovely to always look at you, Graham. But we... sadly, George is missing again, and our love goes out to George and Anne. We hope George can do the show with us soon, and, of course, our love goes to Anne. But we must crack on regardless, because the Millwall fans demand it. This is the fastest growing Millwall podcast out there, and we must say a big thanks, actually. Almost 1,500 of you downloaded the last episode, which is phenomenal for us. We weren't expecting them sort of numbers, so we're very, very pleased about that. Thank you for listening and downloading. So in our last podcast, we were talking about the possibility of making the playoffs, possibly getting into the Premier League. It didn't end out that way, sadly, but a brilliant, creditable 8th finish, 3 points off the playoffs, 72 points. If someone had said to me before the season, Joe Mill, we're going to get 72 points in your first season back in the Championship, I wouldn't have believed you, but I would have bitten your hand off. We're going to talk about that. We're also welcome to the studio our former chief exec Andy Ambler is going to join us for a sizable chunk of chat. He'll be with us as well. But boys, let's crack on with that. What has been a remarkable season and a very, as I said, creditable, very much so. Finish 8th place, 3 points off the playoffs. Ted, like I said, you would have bitten off someone's hand, wouldn't you, for that?
Of course, mate, without a doubt. We was contemplating the playoffs at one point. We was actually in the playoffs at one point, wasn't we? And we had chances, Joe, but I think the disappointing game was the Middlesbrough one. Fulham are a good side. We gave it to them in the first half. Should have been 2-0 up. Unfortunately, we wasn't. And as soon as they scored in the second half, they showed their class, which is they are a very good side in this division.
I backed them to win, to go up.
I think, the only thing is they lost out last year in the playoffs, and it may well play on their minds. Derby are the side that seemed to have been surprised themselves in a sense in getting there, because at one point it looked like they was going to miss out, and they seem to be playing quite well at the moment, and that's obviously who Fulham's got to play. But then Middlesbrough, who's looked like a hardened side to this, with Tony Pulis in charge, he's going to make them difficult to beat. That's going to be a massive game, them and Villa. Against us, they just done a job on us, really. We never really got going in the game, unfortunately. But as you say, Joe, we bounced back against Villa and put in a decent performance and got them under.
It was a hard one to watch as well, because it was just a bit of a flat atmosphere. I mean, it was obviously a sellout, because at the time people thought that this could be the game that gets us into the playoffs, so it could have been a bigger game than it was. Villa had nothing to play for. They made 8 changes. So there was a bit of a flat atmosphere, but you've got to give credit to the players on that pitch for going out and putting the hard work in and digging in and getting, there's none of this players on the beach mentality with Millwall Football Club. They went out there and they got another 3 points and 72 points. Graham, come on.
Very good. Yeah, very good. But I've got to sort of...
you've got something to criticise and moan about already?
Because I think it was a poor display by Villa on Sunday. I think that if you go into the playoffs, you need some momentum, resting players and mucking around like that. I don't think Villa's got much heart. I don't think Derby have got the heart either. I look at Middlesbrough like you, Joe, and I think they're tough enough. I think they could get through on this, because Fulham are a very nice side, but when you put them under a bit of pressure, it's a shame that goal in the first half at our game wasn't allowed, because
I think it was a foul, Graham.
But I don't think it was.
Do you not?
Yeah, I don't think it.
I don't think that was a penalty to Millwall on Saturday.
Oh, I think it was. Yeah. Sorry.
Take those rose-tinted glasses off. And
I would say to you that the second one was more iffy, but I mean, I suppose you can't play with your hand in the penalty area, but there you go.
I've got to be honest, Graham, I don't think Villa have done themselves many flavours.
No, they've got loads of flavours. Strawberry,
any favours with the way that they performed on Sunday. You need... into the playoffs, you need to have that momentum, don't you? Yeah. That's why I'm saying Derby. Derby won 4-1 against, or 4-0, was it, against Barnsley?
But they're an iffy side. And, I mean, you're talking about Barnsley. Barnsley are under pressure. I put my money, I put Joe's mortgage on...
No chance of me getting one of them.
or Middlesbrough.
That much?
Yeah. So there you go. I put because they're hardened. They've got.
Who cares anyway?
Yeah,
who cares?
Get back to the fact
that
it's
nothing to do with us, is it now?
No.
Listen, boys, I just this is a key question for me, right? I don't want to go back next season to be in. This season, I would have took 50 points. I thought when we got to 50 points, I was celebrating. I thought what a season. We stayed up. I don't want, and I think a lot of expectation will be on this team now. There's a lot of pressure on Neil Harris. He's had 3 brilliant seasons as manager. This is his toughest one coming because there's expectation there now, and we don't want to become a team. We won't be favourites for the drop like we were this year. So there will be more pressure on for us to perform. Can Harris handle that pressure, boys?
Undoubtedly, yeah. That the board know that he knows the club inside out. I think if there's any time to give a man money to spend, he's a very trusted manager. I think that Neil Harris will only be as good as the resources that are actually pushed his way. I think he can use bits and pieces to get a decent squad involved, but we do need to spend a little bit of money just to maintain this momentum, Joe.
Do you think that momentum, Ted, can be carried over to next season? And do you think, realistically, that this club can challenge for a playoff place next year? Can we be up there?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that need to be done, Joe. I think Neil needs to develop a plan B. I'm still not sure that, the only way that we've played this year has been 4-4-2, and next season there ain't going to be so many sides that are going to be caught out with the way that we play, if you know what I mean. I think we caught a few people by surprise. We work hard, we're a hard working side. Everybody next season will know that we're going to have to battle to beat Millwall. And I think that Neil might have to develop the team so that it's got a plan B if plan A's not working.
Does they need a new central midfielder?
I think there's... listen, I believe if we can have a summer like we did last year in recruitment, i.e. the people that came in like James Meredith and the other boys that came in, Jed Wallace, George Saville, you look at who I'm talking about here, boys, Jake Cooper, all first team regulars,
Yeah.
If we can have another summer like that where we get players in that are going to be regulars or certainly squad members that can change games and things like that, I think we'll be okay.
Well, let's examine that problem. Yeah? Now other teams know that we can fashion a side that's going to get into close to the playoffs. They won't be so keen to give their players away to somebody like Millwall. I think we have that problem as well. The knowledge of us, how we play, the knowledge of what we can do is going to be a little bit difficult this summer.
I was talking to a person very high up at Wolves to do with their recruitment the other day. I'm not name dropping, trying to make myself look cool.
No, you are
or anything.
cool, mate.
I am pretty cool. Yeah. No, I'm not. I was talking to this guy from Wolves. It was the head of recruitment actually. I can't remember his name, but I was talking to him, and he was saying we love putting our players out to Millwall. They seem to develop well there. And he said now that we're in the Premier League as well, we will funnel more players to Millwall. So, he probably said that off the record, but I've just said it. But that, for me, was very encouraging because of the quality of players that Wolves have given us in the last couple of seasons.
Joe, I think, number one, we should try and move heaven and earth to sign Ben Marshall, because I think he's a fantastic talent. He can play either wing. He played perfectly fine at right back on Sunday, so he's a guy I would love to see coming down as to start with. Let's hope it works out like it did with Jed Wallace last year, and he's our first signing. I mean, if there's anybody else at Wolves, because Wolves are now going to be moving in the Premier League. Yeah. And don't forget, Wolves spent big in the Championship. Everyone's saying what a wonderful side and that, but they spent a lot of money to get that wonderful side together. That means that they will probably do it again when it comes to the Premier League, which means there will be other players for surplus there, and I think so. I'm sure the Millwall recruitment team are looking at that like they did last year. Neil's already gone on record as saying they're planning for next year, whatever. Hopefully he's got his targets in. The best thing about last season was Neil done his business very early in the closed season. If we can do that again by, in other words, have the squad together, which is going to take us through by beginning of July at the latest, the players that come in, the players that go, and it's all done and dusted, so we've got July to build up to August. Because let's not forget something, Joe, we didn't start particularly well last year. We finished fantastically, but at the start of the season we was struggling a bit. So
when was our first away win? Was that Feb?
Leeds? It was February? Leeds. I think Leeds was the first away win, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And that
was a turning point.
Yeah, really, and that was a turning point. Look, since the new year we've been fantastic. But up until the new year, we was all thinking, let's, like you said, Joe, let's get to 50 points and be safe. After the new year, all of a sudden we've got ourselves into a playoff position. But if we can do our business early, get out and start well next season, that will be a key to it. If we can start well and keep it through the season, who knows where we'd be.
Is there anyone there, Graham, that you think is surplus to requirements? Is there anyone you think that Neil should perhaps move on and that is... I mean, it's a harsh question to answer. Yeah. It's a hard one. But is there anyone there that you think is not doing enough?
We know that they've let go some youth players this week. I would think Shane Ferguson might be vulnerable. I would think... Ben Thompson might be vulnerable. I mean, these are players that probably would have,
they're good players. They're good players, and
I don't know whether they're championship players. They haven't used them a lot this season. I think Ryan Tunnicliffe will probably stay because the tackle he did on Sunday probably guaranteed him another year there. I think he, he's the type of player that will close down. Maybe a future Jimmy Abdu type player, closing down and fighting for the ball. Those are the type of player. And of course, we have the question mark over Jordan Archer. Is he going to come on? Because the guy has made mistakes. It looks like it's a lack of concentration on a few occasions. I mean, will he improve over the summer? Will he be able to? Because quite frankly, the Middlesbrough one was probably one of the worst. I mean, he's got to knock the central defender out of the way. And
the second goal, you mean? The second goal. The first, I think both goals he could have done better with, especially the second, which he just dropped.
Well, I think, Joe, there'd be a natural sort of wastage if you want. There'd be players that want to go. Like Shane Ferguson didn't play a lot in the second half of the season.
I like Ferguson.
I like him as a player, Joe.
He hasn't got a lot of pace.
He's got a great delivery, though.
Yeah, he has got a great delivery.
Is he going to be sitting around next season outside of the first team squad like he was this time? That might be going through his head. I'm not saying that he will or he won't, but players like him might well think to themselves that their future is away from the club. I don't know. He might think it's going to be there. He just might have felt he was a bit unlucky this year. It didn't work out for him, and he might come back, work really hard through the close season and be in the starting lineup. But that's things for Neil to decide, and that decision for Neil sometimes comes from the players as well, by them saying they want to leave.
You've got old school, so will we be losing players? Will a Saville, a Romeo go, a Hutchinson go? I mean, Hutchinson...
It's a fair point, Graham, because the exposure that we've had, the team's had, and been on the telly a bit more and been getting a lot more press, then you naturally, and when you do well, managers and scouts, they start looking at your players. So that is a fair point. We don't want to lose some of these good players.
There's also Byron Webster, who's, bless him, he's been out injured for a long while now. He's into his 30s, Byron. Will Millwall Football Club see him as a player that's going to be there? Maybe not, and Byron might leave. I mean,
the other thing is, would he let a big one go, i.e. a Saville go, for a lot of money? Because you've got to get a lot of money on him to revamp the side, Joe. I mean, we talk about lack of funds down at Millwall. What do you reckon about it? I don't know.
Well, I hope not, because that's the Millwall of old, isn't it? Getting rid of a player for a bit of money and then trying to reinvest in not as good players. I hope we can keep hold of the good players, and that Mr. Burleson is again kind enough to give us a bit more money.
I think this squad have got such a togetherness that we always say it, Joe. The key is when you're playing well, you can literally name the starting 11 week in, week out. We was fortunate until the very last couple of games when obviously Marlon Romeo got injured and George Saville, even a bigger blow when we lost him in the Middlesbrough game. Apart from that, it was literally the same team from February onwards, the same starting lineup. When you can do that, you're on a good run. And they seem to have such a good camaraderie between themselves and whatever. Now, I'm just hoping that that's enough for them to say, let's have another go at it. Let's have another shot. Forget about coming to me this summer, mate. I'm staying at Millwall. I'm going to give it another go. Fingers crossed that happens. And with a little bit more of an influx of players that will push these boys in the starting 11, I think we can actually make it to the playoffs next year. I mean, it's going to be more difficult because looking at the sides that seem to be coming down, well, we know West Brom are down and we know Stoke are down. Two massive sides going to be in the Championship.
And probably Swansea or maybe Huddersfield.
Yeah, but they're massive sides, Joe. And not only that, you've got Wigan and Blackburn coming up, two sides that have been in the Premier League. So
and maybe Charlton.
We need 6 points, don't we, next year?
That would be nice. Well, they're never going to beat us to the Den, are they?
No, not at all, mate.
Listen, there's a man outside, a little bald man walking up and down outside. He's
got a funny-looking blazer on him, hasn't he?
Yeah, what's that? 3 lines. Anyway, Andy Ambler, the chief executive of no one. He's at the FA now. The former chief executive of the club is going to join us in the studio in just a moment. Stick with us. We've got grumpy old men coming later as well. Graham has been moaning all day, so I'm sure he'll get that out for you as well. But don't go anywhere. Andy Ambler coming next. Welcome to the No One Likes Us Talking podcast question number 4, sponsored by WePrintAnyGift.com. Firstly, congratulations to Steve Gummus in winning our last competition. Steve received a copy of Millwall Miscellany by David Sullivan. Now, to be in with a chance of winning a copy of the book Done It the Hard Way, the remarkable story of a Millwall legend by the man himself, Alan Dunn, just answer the following question. Born and brought up in Croydon, he joined us from Crystal Palace in 2008. He played against us most recently whilst on loan from Bournemouth. Who is he? Please send your answer to nolutalking@gmail.com. That's all in lowercase, NOLUTALKIN@gmail.com. Also put NOLU podcast question in the subject of your email. The competition will close at 23:59 hours or 11:59 if you so prefer next Monday. The winner will be announced on our social media links at Facebook, Twitter and Tumblr on Thursday the 17th of May. And we'll also give the winner a shout out on the next No One Likes Us Talking show. So there you go. Finally, thanks again to our sponsor WePrintAnyGift.com. Welcome back to No One Likes Us Talking. Me, Joe Amphlett, with this week Ted and Graham, and we are very pleased to welcome this week's guest into the studio. It is none other than the wonderful, the brilliant, he paved the way for the success we're having now. The former chief executive of the club, now at the FA, Andy Ambler, joins us in the studio. Andy, thanks so much for coming in, mate.
No problem, Joe.
It's great to see you. Now, I mean, I bumped into you the other day and cheekily asked you to pop into the show. I said to you then, did you regret leaving? Because we could have got into the playoffs, but then we didn't get into the playoffs, so you probably didn't regret it after all. But has there been any kind of envy from looking in from the outside thinking, I wish I was still there this season?
No.
Yes and no. No, yeah, of course there is. You don't spend that long at Millwall and not be envious of and miss a few things. And yeah, of course, I think it's been a fantastic season. Obviously, the thing I miss the most are the people. It is a special place, and many people have told everybody that. But thankfully, I'm telling people at the FA how special it is. But I think what Neil and the team have done is exceptional, and that camaraderie and that sort of togetherness that I know is there, especially when you're on a good run, is something that you look back at that with envy. But I'm just pleased that the club is in a good place at the moment, and let's see if it can continue and we can continue to move it forward.
And you obviously are a big part of appointing Harris as the manager. That must fill you with great pride as well, that you've seen him blossom into becoming and talked about on radio stations, on TV, about this is one of the next bright young managers coming through, an English manager, and that must fill you with pride.
Yeah, obviously, I've known Neil for a long time, and he's taken to management brilliantly. I like what he's done in terms of his staff. He's not frightened to make decisions. He relies a lot on livers, which is a good thing, because you need somebody that close to you. I think he's recruited well in terms of the backroom staff, and but Neil's got something definitely different about him for me, and I do say that I think Neil is going to be a really, really good special manager going forward. I'd like to add, I hope that's with Millwall, and actually he gets Millwall to the Premier League. Obviously, if not next season, the season after, or whenever. But no, he's atypical of actually some really good English managers. And on the other side of the fence, I'm looking in now, saying how many chances do good young English managers get, and there's not that many actually. And Dyche's doing a fabulous job in the Premier League. Everyone talks about Eddie Howe, but there's not many others really, and it just shows you that when clubs keep turning back to people like Neil Warnock, who's done a fantastic job this season, where are we going in the game? And I really hope that some of the English managers get opportunity at some of the big clubs in the future.
Now, you did say just then he might get us to the Premier League next season or the season after. Do you honestly think that is something that the club are capable of doing in the next couple of seasons? Well,
now's the time to build on the success. I know that's a tough call. I think I remember under Kenny's management, first season we finished, I can't remember, was it 9th or somewhere thereabouts? And it's a really difficult one for the board. What do you do now? Do you invest? Do you invest further and try and bring the signings in? It's no doubt that in order to improve this squad, the transfer record will have to be broken. That's been there for too long. But how do, and there's a big discussion, there's a big decision for John to make, is how do we improve? I think Neil will already be thinking of how he improves, because that's Neil. That's what makes Neil what he is. He's always looking to improve, day by day, week by week, and he demands that of his staff, and that's the success of Neil Harris. But where does the club go from here? Is it capable of having another season? They're question marks, but I'm just fingers crossed, watching from the outside, hoping that can happen.
Going back to your original question, Joe, to Andy about whether he's missing Millwall, this is the first time I've seen him smiling in 10 years. So I don't think he's missing us that much, mate. But I think, like you say there, Andy, about the situation with Kenny, as we was talking off air not so long ago about the way it didn't sort of develop once we finished 9th. Do you think John Berylson will understand from that sort of situation perhaps a little bit more what he needs to do this time round? Yeah, John's a wiser chairman than he was then. Yeah.
He was a bit green, and John would admit that, and he's learned a lot. And that's the good thing about John. He is willing to learn. He's not just his way. He learns from everybody around him. And it didn't go unnoticed that how we struggled that season after. We had opportunities and probably didn't get. I think it's different as well. Sometimes you have to create the momentum and the feeling around a club for players to want to come to the club. And I think that year was very much built on similar team to the one that got us up, if you recall. But this year, Neil's been really, really astute in his signings and the players that have come through. And I think the fact that players, I've heard in January, were given options of going to other, so-called bigger clubs than come to Millwall, and they came to Millwall because they heard what was going on at Millwall. So I think that is what Neil will be trying to build on in the summer.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're in a position now that I think we're in a better position than when Kenny was there, because like I say, Neil's very forward thinking. I know it's been a surprise to all of us, but I don't think it's caught us out in the way that when Kenny done it did, if you know what I mean. Neil's built this all around a team ethic that he knows is working. He's got a squad that he wanted to keep a small squad together, and I think he just wants to infiltrate one or two areas where he needs to improve, perhaps the quality, not necessarily the work ethic, because it's all there, but the quality that we've got, and that's the difficult part.
Yeah, I think the big question is that unbeaten run, so the success Millwall had second half of the season, is it all about that team ethic that you go on a roll and it just goes on and on, or are these genuinely, this squad, really, really good championship players capable of getting promotion? And now momentum is a massive thing in football, we all know that. So you've got to start again in August, so you've got to get that momentum going again. So I think reflecting back on the second half of the season and what magnificent spell it was for Millwall, how do you recreate that? Is it new players? Is it just keep the same thing going? And that's what Neil and the board are going to have to work through in the summer.
You came into our club in 2007, and you gave us nearly 10 years of service. and then you left in 2016 to the FA to be Director of Professional Game Relations. So you really kind of know what it's like to be in that position. You know the juggling that this football club has to do to actually become, more successful. I mean, do you actually get down a lot these days to see us play?
Yeah, I didn't during that run because I spoke to John and I said I don't want to come down to a game and it's the first one that we get beat on that run. So I kept away. I was watching on TV or listening or whatever. But I think the last game I came to was very early in the run at Reading at the Den on a Tuesday night, 1-2-1. But then I've been watching from afar really, and you talked about what you miss about you just miss the games and you miss the going on the away trips and just especially when you go from not winning an away game for so long to then winning. I mean that spell where you won 1-1, 2-1, 3 away games and then suddenly it just all took off was really good to see from the outside.
And I think that really you mentioned a name. And I understand from Neil himself, he does have a lot of contact with Dyche, and people like Warnock and people like that, they seem to be able to, like Neil Harris, seem to get into the psyche of players, and he seems to get that bind, that force to them all wanting to do well. We see other teams, Birmingham has struggled this season, Sunderland, with better players, but there doesn't seem to be this united force behind their teams.
No, and I think Neil, obviously, as he gets more experience, he's the good thing about Neil is he's not frightened to make a decision. And, that early phase of when you become a manager, when you've been a player, that's very difficult because some of the people that you're managing, you were in the same team with. And I think he's gone on from that. And I think he's not, as I say, not frightened to make decisions, key decisions. He's made really good appointments in terms of the backroom staff from what I can see. And Neil will continue to do that.
Do you think the key in the backroom staff, Andy, is that everyone seems to have knowledge of Millwall? I fully expect Robbo at some point or the other to turn up as a coach because he's just retired he's finished at Wimbledon. But all these people coming in, apart from Adam Barrett, but he knew Adam anyway, and he must have just understood that the guy had the Millwall mentality, if we can call it that. But do you think Millwall as a football club, we need that sort of people it's a unique club and they have to understand that before they can get anything out of it?
Yeah, I agree with that. And you don't really, you don't fully understand that until you've been there, seen it, and actually when you come away from it, you actually understand it even more. So I think, we made mistakes along the way with certain managerial appointments. You do. Kenny for 5.5 years. You give Kenny a lot of credit. Kenny understood Millwall more than anybody, I think, who hasn't been at the club, if you know what I mean. Kenny got it really quickly. And you could see the way that Kenny then managed the team and, the governors as he put in place and et cetera, those characters. Kenny understood it more than most. I think people who come in and try and dictate where a difference where they've been successful somewhere else and import it into Millwall do so at their peril, because you have to understand the psyche of it. I mean, it is, people call it a unique football club, and it is a unique football club, but even that uniqueness, you need to go with it and manage it and control it as well. So I think again. Neil, at the end of the season, quite rightly lauded the fans for their support and said there's a togetherness between fans and players, and that sometimes isn't there if one goes in a different direction to the other. And I mean, fans are just as important. And so there's been times over the time that I was there that we did lose it a little bit because there were certain instances that happened. I don't dwell on some of the stuff, Wembley semi-finals and stuff, that meant the team and the manager sort of, I think I said it a few times. I remember that day against Wigan at the semi-finals when it was kicking off in the stands. That had a massive impact on on Kenny and the squad, who thought it should have been about trying to get. It obviously was trying to get to a cup final, but then when we lost, it should have been about the fact we got to a semi-final and taking all the credit for that and using it to cook on in the league. And it wasn't. It was about that another headline that Millwall didn't need.
Just remind me, Andy, was you responsible for Ian Holloway coming to Millwall?
Yeah.
Andy's just walked out.
Yes, I guess I was. I'm not going to shy away from it. I mean,
we all make mistakes.
Well, no one thought it was a mistake to start with, and so if we don't, Ollie kept us up that season.
True.
Kenny helped get Ollie in a room with John in the first instance. It seemed to be a fit that everyone thought would be fantastic. And I think, again, an example of where, for me, that first half a season that we stayed up, then that's pre-season, if you like, I think Ollie tried to take it a step too far too quickly. He tried to get to where Blackpool got really quickly with Millwall, because that was the obvious sort of synergy of where we could go. And I think somewhere along the line we forgot what Millwall was about.
Well, all joking aside, I mean, if it wasn't for the Ollie situation that occurred from that, we probably wouldn't have got nil, because John went that way with an experienced manager, and it failed. Obviously, we could see that it failed. So he turned back inside again to someone that knew the club inside out. So out of the, what I wouldn't say a disaster, but it finished up being a disaster towards the end with Ollie, came Neil.
Well, I always remember when Neil finished as a player and went to Southend, and we kept talking for all the time he was there, and John said Neil will be back, and he'll be back in some way, shape, a coach, or he's probably could even be a future manager. I don't think John realised what Neil could be then, but everyone knew Neil, and there's others who got it, who get Millwall, I guess. It's not for your statement, but I think so. You're right to an extent. If we hadn't have got it, it's like if you don't go through the pain, sometimes you don't come out the other end. And I think you have to go through that journey. And I'll go back to what I said earlier. John is a much more experienced chairman. He's always up for a fight. You know that. He must have. I imagine the figures are somewhere over 70 million now that he's invested, and obviously the CPO threat and everything else still goes on. So John's not up for giving up on it, and I think this season would have been a fantastic one for John to actually see what might be and what could be.
Now let's because I like talking about this player recruitment. It's beautiful subject. All right. Now I think, to answer your initial question, I think that because we've had the likes of Barnsley and Burton disappear from the Championship, I think we do have to push on a little bit. How difficult is it when you've got a wage structure and then you have to recruit somebody who's earning higher wages in another club? Does it upset players? Do they start talking to one another and saying he's earning more than me? Can that upset the boat?
Yep, it can. It depends on how you go about it. I think you could argue that those sort of situations upset the biggest clubs. You could argue Arsenal for example. So of course if you're going to try and improve your squad means better players demand bigger salaries. So where do you go when you set yourself a benchmark? Again, with Kenny we set ourselves a budget, but we set ourselves a weekly salary we weren't prepared to go above. And then we found it really, really difficult. And I remember Kenny saying, we'll end up with players over 5 or 6 players over 10 grand a week back then. And he was right, because we did pretty much after he left or when we were there. And some of them demanded money that, frankly, Millwall without John couldn't have afforded. But we went there, and it's all about the character. And that's, again, I go back to why Neil is good at that judgment, because ultimately it will be, in terms of recruitment, about money, but ultimately it's about character, and I think he's recruited really well in terms of character. I think setting up the recruitment department as we did about 3 years ago with Alex and again I haven't been back down to Calmont Road recently, but I can only hope that set the catalyst for all the work that goes on behind the scenes. You've got 3 guys that were working there when I left. I assume they still are, and so Neil will have a whole different group of players. He'll probably have 5 or 6 targets for each position he wants to improve. They'll all be at different levels of salary and at different clubs, and then it's a case of then weighing up what the budget is, which the chairman and board will have to decide very soon, and then going for your targets and seeing where you need to improve the most. So, yeah.
Do you think the chairman, Andy, will... John Barrelson, the owner, do you think he will see what's happened this season and think, well, if we push a little bit more next year, we could be in those playoffs, we could be pushing? Do you think he's willing to get rid of some money and put that more money in on players, or are we going to just go back to what we are being, a yo-yo club? Are we just going to be... is there not going to be enough investment, and then in a few years' time, the same thing will happen again? We'll be back down in League One. What do you think the future is for Millwall? Are we going to continue to be that yo-yo club, which fans will tell you this has happened for years? But how can we go to that next level and stay in the Championship and push for the Premier League?
It is the question, Joe. You're absolutely right. It's nail on the head, really. Where, as I said, John doing 70 million in this club without a hope of getting much of it back or any of it back is a lot of money. But ultimately, where does he want to take it? Where is he able to take it? These are questions I can't answer. I just know that he's been around now for 12 years.
Like that, yeah, I think it is.
And there's no sign of him sort of giving up the fight now. I think he would be enormously encouraged by Neil and his team and what they're achieving with the players they've got. I think he'll be enormously encouraged by the attendances, especially back of the season, and also about the fact that it's been a good season off the field for Millwall as well. I think it's now down to the board, as I say, to say where do we what do we need to do, and that's the conversation they'll be having the next week, I imagine. What do we need to do? What do we need to put on the table? And so I'm sort of talking around the subject, conscious of that, because it's not easy to actually come to an answer.
I think, Andy, my opinion of it has always been the same. It's not about the amount of investment, it's investing wisely. If you look at our transfer policy from last summer and the players that we've got in, and the ones that we brought in, on permanent contracts, like George Saville and Jed Wallace coming in, Jake Cooper, all successful buys because they've been first team players without spending an awful lot of money. I've always said the same thing. There's a bit of a myth around money. It doesn't matter how much you spend, it's how it works out, if you know what I mean, how wisely it's invested.
That was really,
you get out.
So they're a really good example of the recruitment department working well. When you look at Wallace, Saville, take them out of a club that's going in a different direction where they're surplus to requirements, not because they're not good enough, just because that club was going in a different direction and it's got there. So I think that was, well thought out. The contacts with that football club were good. Kevin and Throwell, who's the recruitment there, we made those contacts years ago because of Kenny went there, right? Yeah. So if you look at that, those contacts, those type of contacts, you have to build up very, very closely, because then you can take advantage of a situation where a club will say, okay, because these are good lads. George and so therefore they've come to a club that it's been money. Don't get me wrong, it's investment, but I think so you've got to work on those connections and take advantage and know what's going on around you. Sometimes I think clubs are very much guilty of having this silo sort of where they work insular and go, we're all right, we'll do this, we'll do that, and then rely on agents. But actually, you've got to look out and see where clubs are going to go in the future. So we can take advantage of that. Yeah,
and as I say, it's like value for money. And also, like James Meredith, who was a free at the end of last season, and we managed to talk him into coming to us. He's been absolutely value for money. He's been one of the best frees we've had for a long while. He's played all season, been consistently a good player.
I agree. And use the loan market. Use the loan market for one or two. Yeah. But one or two that are going to really appreciate it. So,
and of course, we should be more attractive now.
Absolutely.
You'll never be more attractive, Ted.
Can I ask you a question?
Graham, before you do, Andy needs a breather. He needs a cup of tea. All right? Can we just take 2 seconds and we'll come back with Andy Ambler on the No One Likes Us Talking podcast. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to the No One Likes Us Talking podcast. Me, Joe Amphlett, and the boys, Graham and Ted, and we welcome Andy Ambler, still in the studio with us. He's not gone anywhere yet.
Do we really welcome him, Joe? I think we say hello to him.
Well, that's true, yeah. Ted, the devil you know. I bet you wish Andy was still there sometimes.
Of course I do, mate. I love him to bits.
Surely.
Andy was always very, like, I know you're here, Andy. I'm talking about it like you're not here, but
Okay.
like, down the years we had our run-ins. We always had a little Barney, and we obviously we made up and stuff. But Andy would always be there, so you could have a problem and he'd listen to you. And we appreciate you coming in today.
You could
Andy.
have a go at him. That's the
exactly. You could have a go at him, and he'd listen.
Yeah. And many did.
Yeah. Let me ask you that. How did you deal with fans or irate fans when they would catch you in the
I can answer that
and
one.
stuff? And did you ever fear for your life, Andy?
No. No.
I remember him hiding behind me once upon a time.
It's all about talking to people. I mean, I think that's basically it's communication and talking. And I think there was a couple of occasions. I remember on the platform at Chesterfield Station, we just won up there, and honestly, and there was three guys on a bench waiting for the train to come in, and I was getting the train back with Con, one of the directors, and these three guys there, and I stood behind them, and they were slagging me off, saying, "I'd love to ask him about this, that they ain't got a clue, the board, la 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 la," and then they turned round and saw me, and I said, "Well, what exactly do you want to know?" And we started this conversation, and honestly, by the time we got back to London, they want us to go out and get on the beers and have a drink, and everything was fine and rosy.
Like Millwall fans.
So it was, but that was atypical, and so it was no, it was good, and it is about the more you communicate, and that's where I'll give Pete another. Pete was great for me when I first started the club, because Pete made me understand that Pete Garston more than anybody else could. So no, that he's just talking basically.
Was Graham the most difficult customer you had?
I would like to say yes, but no, he's all right.
I'm
really.
all right. I know. I'm all right. Now I'm going to ask him a question about our youth prospects, because I'm quite saddened to see this week that certainly 4 I've got 3 listed here. Jamie Philcott, Christian Mabulu and Noah Chessmain are not being taken. They're given contracts now. It must be very hard to produce or involve these youth players in the first team squad. They need to develop their talents, but I think we're letting go some of this talent here that might have stood us in good stead. Do you think?
Well, success, isn't it? The more success you are, the higher level you get. These players have to be really exceptional to get in that first team, don't they? And that's the problem. And I think the academy is producing players. I haven't seen, so for the ones you've mentioned here that are leaving, Graham, I don't know the ones that have been given contracts, so I can't really comment on, because I haven't got down to the den to watch the 23s play or the 21s play. So, but I can only assume there must be good ones coming through. Yeah.
But of course, Christian Mabulu was reckoned to be very highly rated when we last spoke, Andy.
Yeah, he was, and he definitely was, and I'm a little bit surprised at that. But then again, players, from season to season, players' development can change, and who knows where. And it could be that he wants to go and challenge himself lower down the leagues to come back up. I mean, you got players like Sid. I don't know where Sid's been playing at Chesterfield, hasn't he, in season?
I think he's on the first team squad.
He's just got injured, actually, isn't he?
Yeah, he has.
Yeah, he's going to struggle to make pre-season, I've read today.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, how difficult also, we've had the case of Harry Smith, going off the rails a bit this season. How difficult is it to deal with these young men and to actually motivate them to stay on the straight and narrow?
God, yeah, it's another. It's all right saying when you recruit, go for character, but that's easier to do when you've got tested players that have played so many league games. When you go for the youngsters, they change so quickly at a young age. And, sometimes they do go off the rails. And it's very, very difficult because, when you've got so many players in that youth setup, you can't concentrate on a single player and the problems a single player. That's something that Kenny used to be very big on. He used to say, I can't have one player taking up 50% of my time when I've got to look after 24 first team of the squad. And that's another lesson that, you can't just single out, unless they're really exceptional talent and you want to put, all your eggs in one basket. It's really difficult. Ultimately, the players have to take that responsibility on themselves. Yes, you can help them. And I think player care is better than ever. And I think mental health issues are to the fore. And I think sometimes you have to sort of remember that it is tough because you're always, in a young player's career, they're always thinking that if I don't get this right, I'm going to fall off a cliff, not get a contract. And if that plays on your mind and not able to cope with it, it's very, very difficult.
I think when you get to a certain level, Andy, you know, like these boys have been around for a long while, and Neil would have seen a lot of them through the time when he was under-18 manager and whatever. But they can only go to a certain level with help from anybody else. They show ability, they show a bit of talent. Then I think that final push to get themselves in the first team is a bit more character.
Let's throw Marlon Romeo. I mean, he's been outstanding this season, and he must have had a amount of character to keep himself going. In some of the big games, he's performed very well. And do you know about the player? Do you know?
Well, Marlon's journey was great because you remember that debut in Walsall when he scored, and you know it would have been very easy for Marlon to say I've made it, but I think Marlon then put in some fantastic performances. I think the senior pros took to him. He must have the right attitude in the dressing room, and then you know he had that period when he was out of the team, and he's come back come back stronger, and that is the character that. You know, and you hear ex-players talk about Millwall again and say, until you've played in front of a Millwall crowd, you never really understood what it's like to perform under that sort of pressure. Marlon's come through that, you know, and fair play to him, and he's a good player.
Well, Conor McLaughlin, at one stage, it didn't look like Marlon was going to get in front of him, to be quite honest. So, I mean, I've got nothing but admiration for Marlon Romeo because he's had so many knockbacks in his career, you know, that to come through all that, he has got that extra bit of character and will that he wants to be a success,
and that's why he is.
Yeah.
Andy, let me ask you about Jordan Archer because if you were sitting in the crowds the last couple of weeks, you do hear people when he makes a good save or he kicks something out, like a sarcastic cheer. He's had a bit of criticism from some mistakes he's made. It reminds me similar to David Ford towards the back end of his Millwall career. He was starting to make a few mistakes when Jordan took over from him. It's tough for a goalkeeper because they're on show. Can Jordan come through this? Is he in your opinion a good enough goalkeeper to remain as Millwall number one?
Yeah, he is. He's not shy of confidence, Jordan, from what I remember. I just think the point you made, Joe, is relevant. It's really difficult when you're the goalkeeper because you only have to make one error and everyone's on your back, and I think Fordy went through that as well, to the point where basically there were times when I wondered whether Fordy would get picked because of not because he was training well, but because the dynamic of the crowd seemed to be negative on the team. For Jordan, by his own admittance, I would imagine, has said there's some I should have done better with, but he's made some great saves as well. And that's a tough call. Again, that's the manager and the management saying, how do we improve this squad? The other side of the coin on that one for me, and again, not to criticise, but there has been many games where chances have been created and not taken. So ultimately, it was the goal, the goals for column big enough. But who's going to say, when you look at Morrow and Gregory, exceptional for Millwall, but there's chances that went missing as well.
Can we look at, Andy, some of the things that the decisions you made, good and bad?
Let's stick with the bad ones, Joe.
No, it just reminded me.
How long we got?
We got all day. Talking about Fordy, because that Holloway made a big thing about trying to get him signed him on a decent deal, and the rumours were that he was on big money more than anyone else at that time, and then he kind of just had the worst season ever after that. Was that one of the big... would you see that as a mistake when Fordy was signed on that new deal and then kind of didn't do anything after that?
Yes and no. I know what Ollie tried to do. He tried to bring back that dressing room of governors, if you like. He tried to make Fordy one of the leaders. And I think that's fine. I just think when it's a goalkeeper, it's more difficult. Because, Fordy, if you look back at his career, there was times we brought Mike Taylor in, if you recall, way back, because Fordy just form disintegrated, and Mike came in for 10 games or so and did a great job. So I could see the thought process behind that. And David Ford was a good goalkeeper for Millwall Football Club.
Oh, absolutely.
340 odd games or whatever. I mean, you don't play 340 odd games for Millwall without being decent at what you do you? So... but it is a key position, and I'm sure Neil will have a lot of thinking to do in the summer on that one.
How about Steve Lomas? was that one of the...
Bye, Andy, bye.
Is that one for you that sticks out as your biggest regret or your biggest mistake?
Yes, again, I'll answer yes and no. When you go through that sort of process, he came across, no doubt about it, better than anybody else. He'd been successful in Scotland, and we wanted to go a bit young and hungry. We wanted to go in a direction that we thought was different to what we had before, and it was different. I think what disappointed me about Steve was his choices of management and team around him. I think that was ultimately led to him not succeeding. I think, I thought that he would be able to bring some of the people that had worked with to make him successful in Scotland with him. He did as well. That didn't come through. And then I don't think he had plan B. But he is a good coach. I just think then once we went into that first few games and lost those few games, it was a downward spiral that was very, very difficult to get out of.
Did you underestimate the West Ham connection, do you think, Andy, in that?
Yeah, probably. But, again, that was people within the club, people who've been around the club a long time, said, well, we've had Billy Bonds, we've had this, it's not that big a deal.
True, yeah.
So, again, John listened to that, and, OK, I don't think it's going to happen again, by the way. But people said, yeah, no, don't worry about that, because there's been players in the past that have come across and actually been managed and done well.
I think the thought process behind bringing Steve Lomas in was fine, in the sense of a young, hungry manager, and that. I think there was extra pressure on him, obviously, because of the West Ham connection. He had to get up and running quite early to get people behind him, like Billy Bonds did all them years ago, if you know what I mean. And it just never happened for him. But I totally agree. I think his mistake, and probably Steve will probably say this himself, was not really getting a structure around him that helped him to go forward. Neil's got livers, as you quite rightly say, and we perhaps all underestimate what David Livermore's role is at Millwall, in the sense of how he allows Neil to do what he does, if you know what I mean. And I don't think Steve Lomas ever had that.
I don't think he did. And I think, again, going back to Neil's not afraid of phoning people up and asking opinions.
Yeah.
People who have been in the dugout, people who have got management, 1,000 games under their belt. He's done it with 2 or 3 different managers, and that's again the good thing about Neil. He's hungry to get people's experiences and learn from them.
I want to ask you a question, burning question again, about player recruitment. How do you replace Steve Morison? Would you go for a younger player, because Steve obviously is a leader on the pitch, we need leaders, or is it an older player for you, bearing in mind we've burnt our fingers with some of them in the past?
Yeah, that is a really difficult question. Again, I don't think it's a case of young or old, it's purely character. You've got to get the right character to be that leader. I know that's, again, maybe obvious. It's going to be difficult. Steve Morison a few years ago wasn't the same Steve as Steve Morison now. I'll answer it back, Graham. So that as well as I do. Steve, in his first spell at the club, was exceptional in a different way. He's come back and he knows what it's like now through his experience at Norwich and Leeds to be a leader in the dressing room, and that's what he's been for the last 3 or 4 seasons. I mean, exceptional leader. It depends on the dynamic of the squad. Who else is going to be that leader next year? As Neil got other people who can step in tomorrow's leadership, but Morris, I assume he's still around anyway. So how is that going to work? Could he go younger with Steve being around still? It's all about. It's not about that one person. It's about the dynamic of the squad for me.
It's also the partnership that Steve's got with Lee Gregory. There's such a good partnership that you see gels, and they seem to know where one another is, and calls back forwards, plenty of problems. So if Steve goes out the team now, when I've seen Tom Elliott come in, I don't blame him. I don't think he's had enough time to really form a partnership, but it's not quite there with Lee Gregory like it is with Steve Morison. So Tom Elliott's still a big work in progress with me to try and get some sort of established partnership with It could even be Fred, who played up front on the thing.
Well, we'll discuss that shortly about Fred, Ted, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no.
When Andy's gone.
I tell you a player that I'm delighted for Sean Williams this year. I haven't watched every game, as you know, but I mean the fact that Sean's been in and out a little bit, but he seems to me, from afar anyway, to have come through a difficult period and actually done really well.
Yeah, no, he's been. He's an exceptional part of the team in the sense that he's always the man who's in control in the middle of the park. George Saville buzzes around, gets his tackles in, gets on the end. He was the leading goal scorer, but Sean is the controlling influence in the middle of the park there, and it's ideal for him. And his passing, the range of his passing, we still haven't got anybody in the side that can see the passes that Sean Williams
true.
has.
It's an interesting point that Andy brings up, because we haven't really discussed much of Sean Williams this season because he's been so consistent. In previous seasons, we have to admit that sometimes he's had good games and bad games and gone missing, and I've questioned maybe before an attitude problem. I mean, at some point down the years. That's just my perception. I don't know if that's true. But sometimes he can come across on the pitch as...
He seems a happy player.
Yeah, he does this season.
He seems to have settled in to know exactly what he's doing. He did have the injury and he came back from that, and he's battled his way back into the team to start with.
But when it was going badly, Ted, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do you remember there was a question about his attitude?
I think you're right, Joe. I think there was a spell when I was there, probably 2.5 years ago, where he was struggling a little bit. He was struggling with himself. From what I could see, and I think he's come through that, and I think Ted's right. I think he seems to be enjoying life, and a player that's settled and enjoying life is going to give you more on the pitch.
Absolutely.
So now, Joe, we've got the director of professional game relations here.
What a title! What a title!
There he is. Now, have we got enough time? I can throw out a few subjects. Which ones? It's Sale of Wembley, mid-season break, scrapping of FA
Well, let's
Cup
talk about the
rebirth.
Sale of Wembley. I think that's the big story in town over the last couple of weeks. Andy, it was your idea, apparently, wasn't it?
Depends if it's a good thing or not.
I don't see what the problem is. Now, I saw a story today about the EFL might actually have 50% of the sale. Did you know anything about that? Like the EFL clubs?
The pro game. Don't forget the PL clubs as well. So,
all right. So I just read the EFL.
Is it a good idea? Good question. I think my initial reaction when I heard of it was no, because I think that's everyone's initial reaction. What you're doing, but then actually, when you actually go into the detail and understand that what it does is it secures cup finals, semi-finals, playoff finals. All the games that are played at Wembley stay. England remain playing at Wembley, probably not September to December when NFL games are being played, but ultimately it stays as the home of England and the FA, so nobody moves out of Wembley, but fundamentally what struck for me is the fact that working there and just seeing the size of the thing, the FA is not a property company, so it's owned Wembley Stadium for 10 years, that's all. It didn't own the old Wembley. That was owned by third parties. So if there can be a windfall, and if that windfall can be spent and can be agreed to be spent on facilities, and people use all sorts of terms for grassroots, but what I mean is that facilities that kids can participate and get on. So we haven't got enough facilities that are good enough on a week in, week out basis throughout the winter, and we're way behind all the other big countries in terms of 4G pitches or whatever for kids to play on and develop on. If it can be used on facilities, it could be a good thing, but the devil's in the detail, and I think there's a lot of discussions to be had yet.
And you say if as well. I mean, sometimes there's I think the FA might have lost a bit of trust down the years, and if is a big word, because if you could guarantee to the football fans of this country that the sale of Wembley, the money would go into grassroots, and it would definitely go there, and it would definitely benefit the future national team and that sort of thing, I reckon the majority of football fans in this country would be on board. Sell Wembley, fine, but if the money is not spent correctly, that is when there's going to be problems.
That's where, for me, if this is to happen, the money has to go into a trust which has got trustees, and that can be football people, it can be ex-players, I don't care who it is. It's got to be people who have got the specifics to be able to say to anybody who wants to pitch for this money, you've got to put in a business case, it's got to be to build a 4G pitch, it's got to be in the right area, it's got to have, a business plan behind it to maintain it. That's the sort of thing that we need to be spending the money on, that, and that's the only way you can get your hands on this money. But, these things have all got to be decided upon.
It feels like selling off the family silver to me. God forbid somebody will want to redevelop Millwall's car park soon.
Yeah. Why not?
Do you want to ask Andy about
that one?
Well, yeah, what do you think about that? How do you think that's going to go? Do you know now? Have you got your finger on the pulse about this CPO?
No, look, not really. It's been one of the... I tell you, it has been one of the headaches I'm glad I haven't got anymore, because it's been... Sorry, it's been. I mean,
swear if
you can say whatever you want, mate.
Look, man of FA swears on all costs.
When I joined the club, honestly, joining in 2006, as you said, honestly, I thought this would be done within 3 to 4 years, and we'd be moving into a different. I can't believe 12 years on, and it's still where it is. And it just shows you that something clearly is badly wrong, or was badly wrong. I hope it, or maybe still is, at Lewisham Council for that not to progress. And I just don't understand it anymore. And again, I hope dearly that the new mayor that's been put in place will have a different view and can take it in the right direction. I'm just pleased that John hasn't somewhere along the way just decided to pack up and go back home, because he must have been tempted at times when he saw the lack of support he was getting. So I think it's down to all of us to continue to push it. We're helping from the FA. We've been writing letters and to the council in the past, and we will continue to do so. So, let's just hope that it's not another 10 years without anything happening.
Andy, the final question, because we've kept you too long, but do Millwall Football Club benefit now because? From you being at the FA, because you've been on the inside of the club. No, I'm not. No, let him out.
Are we benefiting with him not being at Millwall?
No, no.
I have to be careful what I say, otherwise the clubs might...
No, Millwall gets a bad reputation, and a lot of Millwall fans, maybe before you went there, think the FA are against us, we always get bad refs, that kind of thing, which is, I'm sure, absolute nonsense. But... there must be people inside the FA, Andy, that you met that thought, oh God, Millwall, they're a terrible club. And have you had to try and persuade anyone different?
No, there's quite a few Millwall supporters within the FA, believe it or not.
Name names, Andy, come on.
But there are.
Martin Glenn, Millwall.
Really?
No. Look. Referee, that was always the put to the referees. FA. The FA actually has no say on the referees in the pro game. It's the PGMOL, Professional Game Match Officials Limited, who appoint the referees.
They're all West Ham fans, though, aren't they?
It must be. So you can moan about referees all you like. It's not the FA, but it does make me laugh sometimes that everyone pins all the woes on the FA. And I'm not going to talk about, but all I'll say is in 18 months I've been there, I found out so much more about the FA that I didn't know, having been in the game 17 years.
You have changed.
So
that blazer's got you, isn't it?
Yeah. No blazer for me. But everyone was saying I was on some of the Millwall history site and whatever, which I'm on, and I go through looking at things saying, the FA will be terrified the thought of Millwall in the Premier League. I can't tell you that nobody has mentioned it to me. Clearly, nobody has mentioned it at all. I think
they don't.
Because. And also, last year, if you want to look at last year coming on the pitch, that was not the greatest day in the club's history. It wasn't the greatest day in Wembley's history.
It really annoyed me.
And everyone got annoyed about it. But again, how we diffuse that a little bit. And I think, again, the behaviour this year, and I've been not monitoring it, but I've been listening to Steve and other people saying how good it's been. The fans have really been good this year. But I think, the fact of the matter is... It is. I can go in there and talk to people and say, well, look, it's not just Millwall. What about this, and then talk about all that Millwall will do. I was actually in the week before the last game of the season, and I bumped into Colin because I'm still a trustee on the Millwall Community Trust, so I still go down to the club and do that. But Colin was showing Steve the preparations for the end of the season to try and keep people off the pitch, etc., which I know for over many years is always difficult. But the planning that goes into that at Millwall and the stewarding and just the way Millwall operates its stadium is, I can guarantee you, better than most stadiums in the country. And some people, it would have to be, wouldn't it? But actually, no, it just makes Millwall, honestly,
let me come back there. We've discussed this before. Why isn't then the FA seen to take action against some of these other clubs? I mean, there's a lot of pitch invasions that go on, but it seems to be highlighted down the Millwall.
But the FA didn't take any action against Millwall for Wembley.
I've got an example, Andy. Do you remember West Ham in the League Cup when
2009 August?
Yeah,
I got it etched on my brain, Joe.
Very well. Now, West Ham, the fans that were the clubs that were charged were Millwall and West Ham, but there was never any Millwall fans that came on the pitch. So as far as I remember, and this is a recollection, I can't remember it. You'll know the details more than me. But the club launched a legal bid, didn't they, to try and overturn the FA charge? Well,
we got charged by the FA. Both clubs did, and we defended ourselves.
Did that cost more than the actual?
It cost $100,000 to defend ourselves. Jim Sturman, QC, etc. And we were found not guilty on all charges. They were found guilty on 2 or 3 charges, if I remember.
Did the club get that money back from the FA?
No, and it's still the case. And
he's working on it for us.
Yeah. I still say to this day that we shouldn't have been charged because we didn't, but I mean, it was a horrible evening.
It was
in many ways. But I think that's in Mike Calvin's book. There's a chapter on that night, more or less, and it was a horrible night. And but we've come a long way from there. But are West Ham going to get charged for what they did a few weeks ago? That's ongoing. I'm not going to, I can't comment on that. But clubs there are other clubs that get charged a lot more. There are clubs that moan about referees more than Millwall. There are, so I think again I go back to. When you're in the club, you think everything's against you because actually the beauty of Millwall in a way is that siege mentality where you want to think that. That's the whole point.
I think it gets the crowd up. If you think there's a ref against you, suddenly you've got 12 men.
Absolutely. No one likes us. We don't care. He's there for a reason, and it's definitely in the Millwall psyche that if you create that mentality that actually no one does like us, actually everyone buzzes off it, and actually the performance on the field is better as a result of that. So there is a bit of psyche about that works.
No one likes us talking, neither, do they?
That's right. Andy, tell everyone at the FA about this new podcast. Andy, listen, we really appreciate you coming in, mate. Come in and see us next season. Hopefully we'll be pushing for the Premier League, and good luck at the FA, mate. You seem to be doing all right. They haven't sacked you yet.
He's done a great job, and I'm always impressed when he speaks. He's done a great job.
Welcome to the No One Likes Us Talking podcast question number 4, sponsored by WePrintAnyGift.com. Firstly, congratulations to Steve Gummas in winning our last competition. Steve received a copy of Millwall Miscellany by David Sullivan. Now, to be in with a chance of winning a copy of the book Done It the Hard Way, the remarkable story of a Millwall legend by the man himself, Alan Dunn, just answer the following question. Born and brought up in Croydon, he joined us from Crystal Palace in 2008. He played against us most recently whilst on loan from Bournemouth. Who is he? Please send your answer to nolutalking@gmail.com. That's all in lowercase, NOLUTALKIN@gmail.com. Also put NOLU podcast question in the subject of your email. The competition will close at 23:59 hours or 11:59 if you so prefer next Monday. The winner will be announced on our social media links at Facebook, Twitter and Tumblr on Thursday the 17th of May, and we'll also give the winner a shout out on the next No One Likes Us Talking show. So there you go. Finally, thanks again to our sponsor WePrintAnyGift.com. Welcome back to No One Likes Us Talking with me, Joe Amphlett, Ted and Graham with me as usual. Our thanks to Andy Ambler. Stay tuned, by the way, to the end of the show. There's a bit of bonus material that you'll hear from Andy's interview. So don't go anywhere when we finish. It's time for Grumpy Old Men. I keep saying we'll get a jingle for this, but I haven't got round to it. So... Graham, do you want to sing?
I'll go first.
No, sing a jingle for Grumpy Old Men.
Sing a jingle.
Make one up.
I'm a grumpy old man.
Okay. Ted, you got any ideas?
No, that does it. I can't top that, Joe. That is brilliant.
Okay, we'll go with that, Graham. I'm a grumpy old man. That's the new jingle for this part of the show. Now, the Grumpy Old Men came about... It's because, well, I work with old grumpy men and they're always moaning about something, so we thought every week we'd come in and something from the matchday experience or something about Millwall that's annoyed us and we want to be grumpy about it. And Graham is going to start us off.
Let's go for it. Yeah, Fred Omidimia, future prospect or another young player struggling to make the grade. Now, we had a lot of celebration last summer when Fred was signed. He was going to push on. I don't know. I mean, I would have put him on maybe in the Middlesbrough game to try and test their heavier defenders with a bit of pace. He doesn't seem to get used particularly well. In saying that, the other day he let me down because he was on at Villa and didn't really impose himself on the centre halves.
No,
what do people think about? Is Fred ever going to be the player we know he's going to be? Is he going to have the pace and the ability? He scares teams. They don't like playing against them. But he doesn't go the full way.
I agree with you, Graham. I think he's been given many, many chances and he's not delivered. He's never really delivered. Maybe in the odd cup game or in a pre-season friendly, not when it's mattered. And he was frustrating the life out of me against Villa as well. That you can't knock his determination and his hard work, but his decision making and his final shot for me. Is not good enough.
Is that due to coaching or is it just
No, I don't think so. I just don't think he's good enough.
I think with Fred, there's an element of inconsistency. There's moments that, like against Villa, he took two people on. He went outside one and inside another, and was away. And it was not breathtaking, but it was brilliant. And then there was another part where he stood a guy up, and then went past him and put a decent cross in. You see things now and again with Fred that makes you think this boy could be a player. Then there's things where he doesn't do right, i.e. when Lee Gregory's playing in that position, if a centre-half comes anywhere near him, when the ball's coming down out the goalkeeper's hand or clearance hand, he gets his body in front, he gets a free kick if nothing else.
Totally.
Fred doesn't do that. No. But I'm prepared to give Fred next season. He's got to be more consistent, Joe.
Yeah.
That's what I'd be saying. What we need him to do is go away like Stephen Reid did in that close season, where he was a bit of a boy and he came back as a man.
Fred's been about quite a few years now.
But he's still very young.
He's been since Kenny Jackett's time, has he not?
Yeah, but he's still very young, Joe. What the trouble is, he came into the side roughly the same sort of time as Aidan O'Brien, but Aidan O'Brien's about 3 years older than Fred. So... what I'm saying is that
there's another player that I think has not lived up to his potential.
Well, he's been injured. He's been injured. I mean, listen, they've got themselves in the first team squad. We do need more, certainly from Fred, next season. I think Neil will stick with him because I think Neil is his mentor. He's been with him since he was 17, 18. Through that, he was the manager then with the 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds. I think Neil sees something in him that he believes he can make into a first team player.
Do you not?
It's important next year for him.
Ted, I remember when we was doing an episode of Lions Live years ago.
Yeah.
When we was at South London Radio, and we had Neil Harris on as a guest, and he was dejected and disappointed because Kenny Jackett had left him out of of the squad.
Yeah.
Neil fought his way back in and became an integral part of that promotion season. No phones in the studio. Turn them off. Otherwise, they will be confiscated.
I don't know how
and
to
you'll get them back at the end of the day.
But anyway,
old men and their phones. I'm talking about Neil Harris when he didn't get into the side. Jackett had left him out of the matchday squad, and he proved himself and proved that he could come back and be an integral part of the squad. What I'm thinking with Fred is that he doesn't have that determination.
I think that's part of it.
I don't think he's got what Neil Neil had been at the club a long time. I don't know. I just don't think Fred's got it in him to turn it around, Ted. I think his time. He's had his chance. His time's up.
Joe, you may be right, but I believe that Fred will get next year as his last year to really prove himself. And look, Neil Harris is with this guy a lot more than we are, and I don't know whether it's his attitude or whether it's whatever. But next season is.
I don't think it's his attitude.
No,
you can't.
Maybe that's the wrong thing. No, I don't think that's not the right word. I'm saying whether he's got it in him to be that consistent first teamer that we want him to be. If he can show them moments that he showed in the FA Cup games the other season, like when he first played against Charlton. The boy at times, I look at him and I think, yeah, you've got something. Then I watch him against Fulham this year, and I think it was Norwich was another one when he started. And he just wasn't there,
Well,
he's got to be more consistent.
It's a very valid point. He's got to stand up to a defender coming and knocking him in the back. He's got to do that. That's what centre forwards have. If that's his role,
that's where he wants to play.
That's where he says he wants to play. He's got to take a whack sometimes and hold the ball up, and he doesn't
and win a free kick.
Yeah.
Ted, now you are not as grumpy as Graham.
Well, I don't know.
But you've got something that you want to get off your chest.
Well, listen, as we was flirting with the playoffs, we got into 6th place, didn't we? And we finished up 8th. I was watching the Vanarama League, I had a conference and that, and their playoffs go down to the 8th position. The bottom 4, in other words, from 5th, 6th, 7th and 8th, play off against one another like a semi-final to go and play the sides that finish 4th and 3rd. The winners of that play the 4th and 3rd to get into the final. So in other words, you've got like a quarter-final, semi-final, then a final. If the Football League had taken that option up of doing that, Millwall would have been in the playoffs this year. So Football League, why do you not do the same playoff system as the non-league?
Oh, well,
they'll bring it in next year.
They will.
Just as we've missed it. We could have been going again.
Genuinely, would you want that to happen? Because I love the playoffs as they are, and I wouldn't want them to be messed around.
Well, all they done, Joe, they don't do like a two-legged thing like we do in our playoffs. So that first game's a one-off game, penalties at the end of it, because Ebbsfleet beat Aldershot 5-4 on penalty, which was quite an amazing sort of thing to watch. And then they went on to play Tranmere, and it's all one-off games. There's no, you win the right to have the home game by finishing 3rd and 4th, if you see what I mean. And then the home games go all upon where you finish. Now, if you finish 8th, you're going to play away, and you're going to play in away all the way through to the final, which is at Wembley. So
okay, all right. It's a fair argument.
Well, if we got Andy Ambler around, we'll have asked him, won't we?
Well, should have, yeah.
Well, we should have. He's gone now, Graham.
Oh, is he really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
He rushed out.
I'm still talking to him.
God,
yeah,
this guy just falls asleep on the job. A brilliant season, and the fans have been fantastic this year. It's been some of the matches at the Den. There's been some great atmospheres, some great games, very memorable. It's been one of the best seasons I can remember. And congratulations to the players, and congratulations to Neil Harris, because I think he's what he's done since he's been manager of the club is get everyone together. The fans are on side, everyone is in unison, and that is a powerful thing.
And we can't wait for next season to start.
Absolutely.
Got a couple of notices before we go, Joe.
Go on.
Yeah. We put out to our listeners, where do we need to strengthen the squad for next season? We got things like we need 2 strikers, cover from Meredith at left back, a goalkeeper, a central midfielder, Marshall if we can afford
Sounds like we need a new team.
Yeah, something like that. The winner of this prize, a prize on this, is New Cross Dave. He gets a boxed Millwall pen for a decent answer. Well done, New Cross Days. And the other thing is...
New Cross Days?
I thought you wouldn't spot that, but yeah. And the other thing is, let me say that keep on giving to the Lionesses. With this show, contributed, and they got to their 10,000 initial limit. They need 30,000 to keep going, so keep on donating.
Beautiful. Graham, Ted... Joe? It's been an absolute pleasure. I suppose we'll do it again all next season, won't we?
Let's hope so, mate.
So, yeah.
Listen, we really appreciate everyone supporting this show and downloading the podcast. As I said earlier, nearly 1,500 downloads of our last episode. is phenomenal. So for us, we really appreciate that. Keep listening, spread the word, and we'll be back in the new season with a brand new episode.
And we will.
See you later.
And come on, England in the summer.
Yes, indeed.
How the English.
God bless you. And
see you next season.
Let them come. Let them come. Good day. Thank you for staying tuned to the bonus material. Yeah, we're giving you bonus Easter eggs now, and not for you, Graham. You're too fat. You're too fat as it is.
Oh, please, Jack.
Andy Ambler's with us for this bonus material. Andy, I bumped into you the other day at the Ray Wilkins Memorial, and it was a beautiful service for a man we both knew very well and loved. I worked with Ray at TalkSport, and obviously I remember him actually playing for Millwall the first time in the South London kit when he was about South London press kit when he was about 40. I remember that vividly. But it was a lovely ceremony, and we just wanted to ask you, Andy, and now you're at the FA. Who's that now? Is that you, Ted, going off again?
It is him.
We just wanted to ask you now you're at the FA. There's been Frank Stapleton in Ray's eulogy said it would be the right thing for the FA now to make this, as it's Man United versus Chelsea, Ray's two clubs that he loved the most, to make it the Ray Wilkins FA Cup officially. Can you say now to us if that could be a possible thing? I think it would be a lovely, lovely gesture from the FA.
Yeah, there's a lot going to go on. You're right. I was there as well last week, and it was a fitting service for a great man and a man that touched so many people's hearts. And Frank did mention that. And so what we'll be doing, obviously Ray's family are invited into the Royal Box. The programme will have a tribute in, probably 4, 5, 6 pages on Ray. Both clubs have asked that I think on the banners that they put out, there's going to be Ray, going to be to Ray. There's going to be some video footage shown, etc., etc. So it's going to feel like we're paying a lot of respect to a great man in the build-up to the game. I think the FA has stopped short from renaming it, because I think that's a precedent that would be very difficult to rename the cup, and for understandable reasons. But I can assure you that everything else is going to be geared towards acknowledging what a great man he was, and it's the perfect scenario, isn't it, for Chelsea and Man United? Is the two clubs that probably his biggest two clubs are in the final. So. So that's what's going to happen on the day.
Brilliant. Andy Ambler, thank you. Boys, we'll see you next time. Bonus over.